online. Pictures, helping us connect to things like our webcams, which that's what this is. I'll explain that in a little bit. But that also because this program is going on live right now from 10 a.m. to 10:30. We are going to be in our studio. We have the chance to actually send observations, and part of being a scientist is, well, getting things wrong. Yeah, it's totally fine to get things wrong. That's how we learn, by getting things wrong and then persevering and testing new things anyways. So, let's stick with that train of thought of how are these animals moving? Hmm. Because you might have noticed something about these jellies, like their bodies. Let's look at their bodies, right? I can kind of point at different parts of their body. If you see the kind of dome shape, that kind of classic jelly shape at the top, I would kind of consider it their main body or their main body part. And that's called the bell. So that is the bell of the jelly. It's because it looks, well, like a bell. But then they have what? Yeah, that's right. They have tentacles, right? Jellies are really well known for their tentacles. And why are their tentacles so famous? What do their tentacles do? Hmm. If you're saying that they sting, that is correct. Jellies have what are called scales, and they have tentacles. They almost have like two sets of tentacles, and each do different things. So you can see in these ones at least, those kind of long reddish tentacles that are on the edges of the bell, right? Like those ones there. Those are their tentacles with their stinging cells. But then they have those really frilly ones in the middle, the ones that kind of look like pom-poms or just kind of like, we'll stick with pom-poms. I can't think of anything else. But those frilly ones in the middle, those are called oral arms. Now, oral meaning like mouth, and arms meaning, well, arms, right? Things to grab stuff with. And that's because they help move food into their digestive system. So it's kind of like the tentacles on the outside, they sting things, right? And then that motion that they do, that kind of, here, I'll show you, that kind of pulsing motion, that helps move food closer to their center, to those oral arms, and those oral arms then bring their food up. Oh, Aletta, sorry, that I should have introduced Elena first. So one of our aquarium friends, Elena, is watching. Special shout out to Elena. I hope you're having fun in Texas. But she is awesome, and she worked here at the aquarium, and she loves a lot of these ocean animals. So Elena, if you have any answers, shout them out or text them over to us. Great. Well, if anyone else is watching, you guys can also text in as well, or just shout them out. That's another thing. You don't necessarily have to tell them to us. If you have friends or family around, you can just share with each other, or keep these to yourself, and then when you get back to school or when you're around other people, share these facts, okay? Help other people learn about them. But one thing that we haven't talked about on these jellies, one things we haven't noticed on their body are any bones, right? Do you see any bones in here? Does it look like they have any bones? I don't think so, right? Not to me, because they're so squishy looking. Where would the bones even be? And their bodies are also really, really simple, too, right? It's mostly just that bell and the tentacles, and there's some digestive organs and stuff inside, but there's no bones. And that is because jellies are called invertebrates. Now, that is the group, one of the groups, that jellies fit into. And now what that means, let's go over and switch to my document camera over here. I can write that out for you so you can kind of see it a little bit better. Ah, it's up here, never mind. So invertebrate, even better. Invertebrate here, that means no bones. More specifically, no backbone. So if you feel the middle of your back, you can even kind of bend forward a little bit, and you feel that in the very center, that bone that runs all the way from the bottom of your back to right up to the top to your neck. What bone is that? That is your spinal column or your spine, and that is made up of things called vertebrates or vertebrates. And so that's where this word comes from. So invertebrates just means you don't have or they don't have any bones, but especially that spinal bone. Now, the opposite of that would be vertebrates. I don't know if we have a word picture for that, but really it's just the same word, but without the I or the N in front. That's right. There you go. Vertebrates. And that would be the opposite, meaning animals with bones, especially that spinal column. And now, like we just observed, we are vertebrates, right? We have that spine. But sea jellies don't. Now, I'm going to ask everyone out there a question. And this is a great one to respond to, but even just think about it to yourself. Do you think there are more invertebrates or more vertebrates on our planet? Are there more animals with no bones or more animals with bones? Start to ask yourself, well, which animals have bones and which don't? Think about that. All right. Well, let's see. What kind of animals can you think of? Let's see. Animals that we'll probably be most familiar with, kind of closest to us, are animals we may have as pets, like dogs or cats. Well, they have bones in their body, so those are vertebrates. There's a lot of dogs and cats in the world. What about some people have like pet reptiles, like snakes, turtles, or tortoises? They have bones, so those are vertebrates. Birds? Some people have birds. Oh, there's a lot of birds in the world. Okay. What about invertebrates? Well, we know sea jellies are one for sure. There's a lot of jellies in the world. What do you think? More vertebrates or more invertebrates? Okay, are you ready for the answer, everyone? Give me a drum roll wherever you are. And the answer is going to be that there are more invertebrates on our planet. That is correct. Yes, and now, not necessarily the reason, but one of the big contributors to it is because think of all the insects on our planet, right? That's one contributor. There's a lot of insects on our planet. And pretty much, I think it's fair to say that all insects are invertebrates. There might be some that I don't know about, but I'll say most, if not all, insects are invertebrates. They don't have bones in their body, and they make up a large chunk of the living mass on our planet. But there's also things in the ocean like zooplankton. Now, we won't get too far into that stuff, but that's just to show that there's a lot of invertebrates. So for the next amount of time that we have, I want to highlight a couple more invertebrates. So thinking of jellies, maybe we can get a picture of just like a still picture of jellies. There we go. We've already talked a little bit about them, but what else can we know about them? What else can we learn about them? Well, I kind of told you that they have I kind of mentioned that they have like digestive organs, which you can kind of see in this photo. Over towards the end, if you see right tucked into the middle, in between the frills here, in between those oral arms, would be their kind of, what we would consider their mouth, right? And towards the center there, right in the middle of their bell, that's where they have things like their reproductive organs and their digestive organs. And that's really about it. They're very simple animals. And this kind of goes back to thinking about the way that life has evolved and changed on our planet. Life started out really, really simple. And these jellies are really, really old on our planet as well. So they don't have things like, let's see, it'll be easier to say what they don't have. Or, yeah, we'll go down what they don't have. They don't have a heart. They don't have lungs. They don't have a brain. That's a big one. They don't have a brain. They don't have bones. There's a lot that they don't have, right? Like I said, they have reproductive organs and digestive organs. And the rest of their body is actually mostly made out of water itself. I believe they're about, here's some cool jellies here. I believe this one's like a comb jelly. And now some of them can do really amazing things. Even though they're so simple, I don't want that to seem like, they don't do anything, because it's that simplicity that actually, I think, really shows off how incredible they are. Because if you think about it, we have so many things in and on our body. Vertebrates have so many things, from bones, from a skeleton, even though it seems simple to us. The fact that we have a skeleton to walk around with or to help us move our bodies is huge. We have a brain, right? Jellies don't have a brain, yet they can still do some of the stuff that we do. They can still get food, right? And it's kind of crazy. Now, that whole idea of them not having a brain, you could definitely look that up because it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, right? It's not like they're completely brainless. It's more that they don't have their their brain system isn't in one single spot. That's something that we have, right? Our brain is in our skull, and that's it. And that is actually a really, really useful, important, significant adaptation that we have, that some animals have. Jellies don't have that. It's almost like their brain, we almost call it it's called a neural net. It's like it's spread throughout their entire body, basically. So it's not centralized. It's not concentrated in one place. So they can't really do a lot of advanced thinking, but they can still move their bodies. They can do things that we are also able to do, like move, right? Eat, catch food. They have those instincts. But they're really, really amazing. But so are other invertebrates, right? So jellies, they are squishy, right? They're squishy. Not all invertebrates are, though. Which is kind of weird to think because we said that invertebrates are animals with no bones, and at least for us vertebrates, our skeletal system and our bones are what give us our structure, right? It's what allows us to stand or kind of, keep our back upright, things like that, move our body in different ways. So, how do animals that are invertebrates, what kind of different ways may they have come up, or not necessarily come up, but what different ways, what different adaptations do they have to do those things as well? So let's go ahead and check out a different animal. Let's check out one of our sea stars. Nice. Now these are specifically bat stars. So you can see it's a little cluster of them. Now you may also know them as starfish. You probably also knew sea jellies as jellyfish, but at the aquarium we like to call them sea stars and sea jellies because they're not fish. And we know that because they don't have bones. Fish have bones. And that's one reason why they're not fish, but it's the one we're going to focus on. So we try to kind of get their name a little bit more accurate, kind of break that idea that they might be fish. So sea stars and sea jellies. Now, these sea stars, let me ask you, what do you think they feel like? Some of you may have felt a sea star before, some have not. I interact with a lot of guests here at the aquarium, and it's usually their first time ever touching a sea star. And the thing that I usually hear the most is, oh, it's not squishy, or I thought it'd be softer. Yeah, most people I think because of a specific, famous pink star on a children's network, they think that it's going to be really squishy, but sea stars are actually pretty hard on the outside. They're actually in a group of animals called the echinoderms that are defined by having hard, rough, sometimes even spiky skin or kind of outside layer to them. And it is true. These bat stars, they may not have lots of bumps to them, but they almost feel kind of like scaled, kind of like fish scales, almost actually more like rough, like a reptile's kind of texture or scale to it, which is pretty interesting, I find. I know I was surprised when I first felt them, but that's part of their structure, right? So some invertebrates have more of that kind of hard structure to them on the outside. And we may look at some animals that have that, a little bit more obvious. But let's highlight one thing about these sea stars. One thing that I want to highlight about them, because I just think it's the coolest thing ever. When I first learned it, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But it's how they eat, right? Because if you think about it, whether you're a vertebrate or an invertebrate, if you're a living animal, we all have to do certain things like breathe, or at least get oxygen in some way. We have to be able to eat or obtain energy. But for us vertebrates, it's easier with bones, or at least I find it pretty easy, right? We have hands especially, and we have teeth. Teeth are bones as well. They're part of our skull, right? And so those help us chew, it helps us break down food, it helps us grab food. Imagine if we didn't have any of those. Do we have a picture of like the underside of a sea star by any chance? Let's see. Yeah, let's see what they look like underneath. So this is what we would see if we flipped a sea star over, and you would see these rows of what we call tubed feet. Now that's because, well, they're basically their feet, and they look like tubes. Scientists are very creative, I know. And now these tube feet are like the most important part to their livelihood, you could say. Because these tube feet, they don't just help them move, right? So you can see that this sea star, we didn't just glue it onto the glass or onto the wall there. They actually are able to suction or hold themselves onto material, whether it's glass or a rock or a reef. They can actually suction on and kind of stick on. I believe they actually almost make like their own kind of natural sticky substance, almost like their own natural glue, which is pretty incredible, right? We can't do that. We just have bones. But they have those tube feet. And those tube feet are also, get this, their taste buds as well. So what helps them sense taste? So it's almost like if you had taste buds on the bottom of your feet, and everywhere you went, you're like, ooh, that piece of gum I stepped on was spearmint. Nice. See, I think it's better to be a vertebrate, but that's just my biased opinion. But these sea stars, they use their tube feet to taste, to walk around, but also to eat, because one of their favorite foods is clams, or like shelled animals like clams and mussels. Now you may be asking, how the heck do they open up those clams and mussels if well, no bones to really help give them structure? Well, they use that stickiness of their tube feet, and it's really strong, and it actually allows them to be able to pry open that clamshell just a little bit. And then what they do, because they can't get it necessarily open all the way, what they'll do to be able to fit into between that space is they do something. They spit out their stomach. Now it's still attached to them, but they spit out part of their stomach. So they kind of digest on the outside instead of on the inside like we might. And it looks like this. If you see this little goop there in the middle, that is the sea star's stomach. Yeah. So that is going to be part of their stomach. So imagine there was like a piece of shrimp underneath them. They might crawl over on top of it using their 2 feet. Maybe a piece of fish fell down from higher up in the ocean, where maybe a bigger animal ate something and the little scraps fell to the bottom. Well, these sea stars are really great at cleaning those scraps up. They'll crawl over it. They'll basically put their stomach out just like this and slowly digest it on the outside. And when they're all done, they'll slurp it up, or they'll push that stomach into that clam, like I said, and eat it all up, digest it. And once it's all a nice smoothie ready for them to finish, they slurp it back up, and boom, they're all done. Now, that's one way to eat, right? Again, I'm going to stick to my teeth and my hands, but that's how sea stars do it. And that's an incredible adaptation that they developed in order to be able to live a life without any bones. Like the name of this program, No Bones, No Problem. They have solutions. Let's go ahead and let's look at maybe one more. Let's see, hopefully we have time for the 2 more. Let's do one more. I want to look at coral. So now you might be saying, oh, coral. I didn't know coral was an animal. We get that a lot. People aren't necessarily always sure whether coral is like a plant, an animal, or even just a rock. Some people didn't even know that coral is like an actual living thing. But it is. It's kind of like all of those things wrapped into one. I'll explain how or why. But coral is a really amazing thing. And thinking about their structure, they are invertebrates. And there we go. So if we look at we call this, I think, is our coral predators habitat. You can see all of these places where there is some coral. It's the really bright, colorful pieces. And the fish in their habitat love to interact with the coral. They're really important. Now you might be saying, well, those look like tough, hard objects. Are you sure they don't have bones? We can go over to my document camera and I can show you what that would actually look like, what a real piece of coral looks like, or at least part of coral. If you see this, this is what we call a coral skeleton. Now, I know what you're saying. You said they're invertebrates, they don't have bones, how do they have a skeleton? Well, don't blame me, blame the scientists who named them. It's technically not really a skeleton. We call it that because it's basically what's left behind once coral, the main part of coral, called the polyps, once they die. And so once that happens, this basically rock is what's left behind. And the coral polyps themselves, and we'll take a look at those in a second, but the coral polyps, we're looking at one. So this here is the coral polyp. And if you go back to our document camera, you can see basically where each of these little crater shapes are. That's where one individual polyp was growing out of. So coral itself is made up of hundreds of thousands of polyps all growing together, and what they do is they form kind of underneath them, or they form their own basically rock. So it's not made out of bone, it's not the same material bones are made out of, it's essentially a rock that they make themselves to be able to grow on. And while they build that even further out, that is how we get things like coral reefs, those big structures. Now, go back to that picture of our polyp. Remember, so a polyp growing out of each of those, we would have one of these. And this is really zoomed in. But I want to talk about now how these animals, these invertebrates, and you can see no bones, right? No bones in there. How these invertebrates eat, or better said, get their energy, right? Because earlier I said animals need to be able to eat or get energy, because not all might be eating in the same way, right? This is another adaptation or solution to that kind of that requirement of having to get their energy, but having it be tougher because they don't have bones or skeletons to help. So, do you see all these little dots? Now, as opposed to the sea star that decided to be able to, spit out its stomach, again, it didn't decide to. It didn't have a choice, I guess. But they spit out their stomach. That's one option. But these polyps, they actually evolved to have what we call a symbiotic relationship. So that means that they're not working alone. They are working with a partner. All of these little dots are a special kind of algae. I believe it's called zooxanthellae, right? Yeah, there we go. I always mess up the pronunciation, but zooxanthellae, you don't need to remember it. We won't quiz you. But those are tiny little pieces of algae, which is kind of like plants. They're a little bit different, but all you need to know is that they do photosynthesis, just like plants do, meaning they get their energy and make their own energy basically from sunlight. And those zooxanthellae, those algae, they're actually living inside of the coral polyps. But by choice, the coral polyps let them live there. So it's kind of like a relationship they have where the coral polyp gives them a home, aka their body, their polyp, right? And in return for that protection, the algae basically gives them a fraction of the energy that they get from photosynthesis. So the polyps themselves, they can still kind of collect food and eat, but most of their energy comes from that shared component that they get from that algae that lives inside of them. So rather than, go out and grab their own food, they are able to share that food because of this relationship they have, this symbiotic relationship that they developed with this algae. Now that's another incredible solution to that no bone problem, right? No bone, no problem. Exactly. All right. I think we have maybe time for one more quick one. Let's see. Do we have any photos of a crab? Any crab? There we go. And I think this is a nice way to end, kind of connecting back to that first part, right? That we said that insects being the kind of some of the most numerous ones that we have. Now, our crab here isn't necessarily an insect, but it does connect to the kind of structure that a lot of those insects have. Think of things like ants, right? They'll have what we call an exoskeleton. And there's that use of the word again. Not really a skeleton, but you can see that it's similar because it's their structural system, right? It's the system of their body that gives them that ability to move in ways that things like jellies can't, right? Because they don't have any sort of skeleton or exoskeleton or kind of hard component to them. But these crabs and some insects do have that exoskeleton or that component. You can see it's that crab shell, right? On the outside. So the fact that they have a shell on the outside and all the soft bits are on the inside, if you think about it, kind of like the reverse of what we have. Most vertebrates, we have our soft parts on the outside, right? We have our squishy skin, but our hard parts or our bones or skeletal system is on the inside of those. So an exoskeleton just means outside skeleton, right? And that's what these crabs have developed. Now, in a similar way, there's some animals like sea snails, right? Or you even talked about some like clams and mussels, and they have shells. So not shells in the same way as these crabs, right? That kind of cover their body like armor, but instead almost like a little mobile home that they're built into. You can see just slightly, this is called a cowrie, a chestnut cowrie, but this little parts there and those little antennas there, those are the soft bits, the soft parts, the main body of that snail. And then they grow and kind of build their own shell, covering their body that gets a little bit harder over time as they develop when they're young. And so those are basically doing the same thing. It's giving them a protection or a layer, a structure that allows them to live their life. And we'll end here on our beautiful little crab here. Now, what is our crab doing? Well, it's trying to hide. These kinds of crabs, what they do is they will grab material and they'll basically cover themselves with it so that they can kind of blend in and hide. I don't think that this one quite got the memo about, how to be great at this, but, bless their heart. They sure are trying, right? But this is the kinds of things that they come up with living in a life without bones. They may not have bones, but they're still being able to manage and do a lot of the things that we vertebrates are able to do. All right, so with that said, we are just about at the end of our time. Hopefully, though, now you have a new kind of lens or way to look at the world. Go out, see the natural world, and when you run into an animal from a safe distance, make some observations and ask yourself, are they a vertebrate or an invertebrate? And see where that kind of line of questioning leads you, right? See if you can figure out what kind of adaptations they have to help them survive and live in this world. All right, thank you, everyone. Elena, if you're still watching, we miss you. But have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your time.